So my dad was telling me a story not too long ago about a time when he had a lunch meeting. He was meeting for the first time a couple of parishioners at one of his churches in Louisiana. It was an out-of-town meeting, so he arrived a little early at the restaurant. He went in, told the hostess he was a few minutes early for his noon reservation and his party hadn't arrived yet, but she seated him anyway. So my dad sat there on his phone answering a couple of emails. Suddenly he noticed it was 5 after 12. The parishioners were late. 5 minutes became 10, then 15, then 20. No call, no text. He had been stood up. He was getting frustrated. He had driven an hour for this meeting, and he had to now drive an hour home with nothing accomplished. He was just about to leave when the latter approached him. "Excuse me, are you Bishop Thompson?" "Yes," he replied. "There are a couple men 2 booths over. They arrived quite a while ago, and they've been waiting on you." Our story for today, and indeed every second and third Sunday in Advent, is the crazy camel-hair wearing, wilderness living, locust eating, screaming prophet John the Baptist. Last week we heard from the Gospel of Mark how the prophet John was paving the way for the good news of the Messiah, and how people were coming all throughout the hillside of Judea and all throughout Jerusalem to hear this good news. This week, it's the Gospel of John's turn, and things have escalated quickly. The Pharisees throughout Jerusalem have heard about this prophet in the wilderness, and they seem to be alarmed. They send out priests and Levites not to experience the prophet, not to listen, not to learn, not to cleanse themselves in baptism, but to interrogate. The greatest herald the world has ever seen, the one whom Jesus will later say, "Among these born of woman, no one is greater than John." That prophet is standing right in front of them. Yet instead of seeing, hearing, and feeling the good news that the Messiah's coming is imminent, they instead question, cross-examine. They expect and look for the worst. You know, sometimes we are all too willing to look for the bad or the negative aspect of the situation that we miss the truth of the good news standing right in front of us. Or in my father's case, just 2 booths down. In this season of pandemic, of political election, and even social unrest, it seems as if we have been actively seeking out the worst in all of humanity. For the first time in my life, it seems like no one can agree on who or what to trust for the truth, let alone the good news. Conspiracy theories swirl about our lives, no matter the topic: politics, media, science, religion. A lack of trust has infiltrated this country, and we are left looking for the worst in one another. So is our society so different from the one that Jesus was born into 2,000 years ago? You know, the reason my father was angry was because he was living in his own world at that moment in the restaurant. He didn't look around. He didn't ask the waiter if his party had arrived. He had his own assumptions, and he was content with that. Now, I'm not dogging my dad. I think we're often like that. I know that I can be. I often am. I can get caught up in my own world, and when I do that, I put blinders on, and I only see what I want to see. And the thing is that it's often not the truth. But this all stops when we take off our blinders, when we set aside our preconceived notions and take a look at one another. And I mean really take a look at one another. If we instead look at the other as a fellow traveler on the journey of life, not just obstructions on the road, if we actually got to love our neighbor, and I think that trust would come a lot easier. And if trust came easier, then I truly believe that negativity would make way for hope and possibility. That's what this season is about. Making way for the possibility of something new, a kingdom defined by its unconditional love for God and our neighbor, a kingdom of hope where we look out for one another, especially the least among us, not vilify them, not expect the worst from them. Advent is about the anticipation of something amazing. And if we are to truly live into this season, then we must broaden our perspective from our own world and begin to truly look for the good news from our neighbor, the good news from our rival, the good news from an incarnate God who shows us the way of love. I love you. God bless you. And goodbye for now.